Paths of Glory was not just another war film. It was a cinematic rebellion that shattered Hollywood's comfort with patriotic narratives. Behind the scenes of Stanley Kubrick's masterpiece lay a battlefield of creative conflicts, political controversies, and production nightmares that nearly destroyed the film before it ever reached theaters. From explosive arguments between Kubrick and Kirk Douglas to international bans that made the film a political weapon, what audiences saw on screen was only half the story. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on one of cinema's most powerful anti-war statements to reveal the chaos that birthed it. Here are 20 weird facts about Paths of Glory, plus a bonus fact that will change how you see this classic forever. Grab your helmet and stay with us until the end. This journey through cinematic history is about to get explosive. Number 20, the military cover-up that almost buried the film. The French military was not just unhappy with Paths of Glory, they actively worked to bury it. When Kubrick's film premiered, French authorities immediately banned it, claiming it discredited the French army. What audiences did not know was that this was not just about national pride. The film's depiction of the 1917 French mutinies struck dangerously close to a truth the military had spent decades concealing. Historical records show that French soldiers did indeed mutiny after being sent into impossible battles, with over 600 men eventually executed for their refusal to continue fighting. The French government did not officially acknowledge these mutinies until the 1990s, nearly 80 years after they occurred. Kubrick had stumbled upon one of the military's darkest secrets, and they responded with censorship. It was not just artistic criticism, they feared it was historical accountability. Number 19, Kirk Douglas's dangerous stunt that nearly killed him. Kirk Douglas did not just act the part of Colonel Dax, he risked his life for it. During the grueling trench sequences, Douglas insisted on performing his own stunts, including a dangerous moment where he had to navigate through actual barbed wire while explosions detonated nearby. What the audience sees as authentic war tension was real-life danger. On one particularly chaotic take, a mistimed explosion sent shrapnel flying toward Douglas, narrowly missing his face. The actor, bleeding from minor cuts, simply brushed off the incident and demanded another take. It was not just dedication to his craft, it was a manifestation of the film's central theme, the human cost of war. Douglas later wrote in his autobiography, "I wanted to feel what those soldiers felt, even if just for a moment. That day, I think I came dangerously close." Number 18, the studio executive who tried to censor Kubrick's vision. United Artists executive Arthur Krim did not just have notes on Paths of Glory, he demanded fundamental changes to Kubrick's vision. When Kubrick submitted his final cut, Krim responded with a list of demands that would have gutted the film's power. He wanted the ending softened, suggesting that the French soldiers should be shown as more clearly guilty to make the military's actions more justifiable. Kubrick refused, engaging in a bitter battle of wills that lasted weeks. What audiences did not know was that this was not just about creative differences, it was about Hollywood's fear of political controversy. In the midst of Cold War paranoia, an anti-war film that questioned military authority was considered box office poison. Kubrick's eventual victory was not just personal, it was a watershed moment for directorial autonomy in studio filmmaking. The battle for Paths of Glory was fought as fiercely off-screen as on it. Number 17, the German locals who protested the production. Filming in Germany was not just logistically challenging, it was politically explosive. When Kubrick's production team arrived to shoot in Bavaria, they encountered unexpected resistance from local residents who had not been fully informed about the film's content. Word spread that an American director was making a film about French soldiers during World War I, and tensions erupted. What began as minor complaints about noise and disruption quickly transformed into protests about historical representation. Local veterans groups demanded to see the script, arguing that the film might misrepresent the war's reality. Kubrick, characteristically stubborn, refused to make changes but did meet with community leaders to explain his vision. These meetings were not just about smoothing production difficulties, they became philosophical debates about memory, history, and how art should engage with trauma. The film that would eventually challenge military authority everywhere first had to survive its own battlefield of public opinion. Number 16, the real soldier who sued the production. Paths of Glory's connection to reality was so strong that it triggered a lawsuit. After the film's release, the family of a real French World War I soldier who had been executed for cowardice threatened legal action, claiming Kubrick had used their relative's story without permission. The truth was more complicated. Kubrick had based his screenplay on Humphrey Cobb's novel, which itself was inspired by real events but was fictionalized. What audiences did not know was that Cobb had actually researched several court-martial cases from the war, blending elements from different trials. The lawsuit never went to court, but it revealed something profound about the film's power. It felt so authentic that people believed it was telling specific, true stories rather than representing a broader historical truth. This was not just legal trouble, it was evidence that Kubrick had achieved something remarkable, making history feel immediate and personal enough to claim ownership over it. Number 15. The actor who suffered real PTSD from filming. The emotional toll of Paths of Glory extended beyond the screen. Timothy Carey, who played the condemned soldier Private Farrell, became so immersed in his role that he began experiencing symptoms of what we now recognize as PTSD. During the execution sequence, Kubrick demanded take after take, pushing Carey to increasingly emotional places. The actor, already known for his intense method approach, began blurring the lines between performance and reality. Crew members reported seeing Carey weeping uncontrollably between takes, sometimes refusing to break character even when cameras stopped rolling. What audiences saw as powerful acting was something much more disturbing. A man genuinely experiencing the terror of his character's situation. Kubrick, ever the perfectionist, initially saw this as dedication, but eventually became concerned when Carey's distress continued beyond filming. The experience left a mark on Carey that lasted for years, a stark reminder that sometimes the cost of creating art is paid in human currency. Number 14. Kubrick's secret research trip to military archives. Stanley Kubrick was not just a filmmaker, he was a relentless researcher who went to extraordinary lengths for authenticity. Before writing a single scene of Paths of Glory, Kubrick spent weeks in military archives across Europe, digging through dusty court-martial records from World War I. What he discovered shocked him. Hundreds of cases where soldiers were executed not for cowardice, but for refusing to participate in what they recognized as suicide missions. These documents were not just historical curiosities, they were evidence of systematic injustice that had been deliberately obscured. Kubrick made copies of key documents, incorporating real dialogue and procedural details into his screenplay. What audiences did not know was that the most shocking moments in the film were not inventions, they were directly inspired by actual historical records. The trial scene, with its cynical manipulation of justice, was not Kubrick's dark imagination. At work, it was a dramatization of military proceedings that had actually occurred, preserved in forgotten files that Kubrick had brought back from the dead. Number 13. The censorship battle that split Hollywood. Paths of Glory did not just face international censorship, it ignited a war within Hollywood itself. The Production Code Administration, which enforced moral guidelines for American films, initially refused to approve the movie, objecting to its critical portrayal of military authority and its implication that soldiers were sacrificed for political gain. What followed was a battle that split the industry. Some executives, fearing government backlash and potential boycotts, sided with the censors. Others, recognizing the film's artistic merit and growing social relevance, defended Kubrick's vision. The controversy was not just about one film, it was about whether Hollywood could address complex moral questions without sanitizing them. Kubrick and producer James Harris refused to make significant cuts, instead engaging in a campaign that framed the film as a patriotic statement about the value of individual soldiers. Their eventual victory was not just personal, it was a crack in the foundation of the censorship system that would soon crumble entirely. Number 12, the European premiere that ended in a riot. The film's European premiere in Paris did not just face criticism, it erupted into chaos. When Paths of Glory opened in Paris in 1958, tensions were already high due to the ongoing Algerian War. The film's depiction of military injustice resonated uncomfortably with contemporary French politics, and protests erupted both inside and outside the theater. What began as organized demonstrations by right-wing groups quickly devolved into physical altercations between protesters and filmgoers. Police were called to disperse crowds, and the screening was temporarily halted. The irony was profound. A film about the consequences of military conflict was itself becoming a battlefield. Kubrick, who attended the premiere, watched in disbelief as his fictional depiction of military conflict sparked real-world violence. The French government's response was swift. They banned the film for nearly 2 decades, not just because it portrayed historical events critically, but because it had become a symbol of contemporary political resistance. Art had become activism, whether Kubrick intended it or not. Number 11, the original ending that was too dark, even for Kubrick. The version of Paths of Glory that audiences know has a relatively hopeful final scene, but Kubrick's original ending was devastatingly bleak. In the first cut, after the execution of the three innocent soldiers, the film ended with Colonel Dax walking away from the battlefield as explosions continued in the distance. There was no scene with the German girl singing, no moment of shared humanity, just the cold reality that war continues regardless of individual acts of conscience. Test audiences found this ending almost unbearable, and studio executives demanded something that offered at least a glimmer of hope. Kubrick, after much resistance, eventually added the tavern scene, creating one of cinema's most powerful emotional moments. What audiences did not know was that this seemingly perfect ending was actually a compromised one that paradoxically made the film's anti-war message even more powerful by showing the possibility of human connection amid destruction. Sometimes, commercial pressure can accidentally create art. Number 10, the dangerous real explosions used in battle sequences. Go ahead and like and subscribe because what I'm about to reveal will change how you see every war film you have ever watched. For the battle sequences in Paths of Glory, Kubrick did not use special effects, he used real military-grade explosives. Working with German pyrotechnics experts who had actual combat experience, Kubrick orchestrated explosions so dangerous that crew members were required to sign special waivers. The actors, including Kirk Douglas, were positioned shockingly close to these detonations, with the camera capturing their genuine reactions of fear and disorientation. One particular sequence involving a simulated mortar attack went wrong when an explosion erupted closer to the actors than planned, sending several crew members to the hospital with minor injuries. Kubrick, ever the perfectionist, kept the footage in the film. What audiences perceived as brilliant acting was actually genuine terror. This was not just filmmaking, it was controlled chaos that blurred the line between representation and reality, creating an authenticity that CGI could never replicate. Number 9, the historical consultant who quit in protest. Paths of Glory had a historical consultant who does not appear in the credits because he quit in protest. Professor Alain Raisson, a French military historian initially hired to ensure accuracy, walked away from the production after what he described as deliberate historical manipulation. Raisson argued that Kubrick was taking too many liberties with the actual events that inspired the film, particularly in how he portrayed the military command structure. What began as professional disagreement escalated when Raisson discovered that Kubrick was deliberately amplifying certain elements for dramatic effect. The historian felt this crossed a line from artistic interpretation to historical misrepresentation. Kubrick, characteristically unapologetic, responded that he was not making a documentary but a film about universal truths. This philosophical clash was not just about historical accuracy, it was about the fundamental purpose of art. Raisson's departure left a void that Kubrick filled with his own vision, creating a film that was less historically precise but emotionally truer to the human experience of war. Number 8, the secret connection to the Cold War. Paths of Glory was not just about World War I, it was a thinly veiled commentary on contemporary Cold War tensions. What audiences in 1957 did not fully grasp was that Kubrick was using the historical setting to explore contemporary anxieties about nuclear annihilation and the military-industrial complex. The film's portrayal of soldiers as expendable pawns in a game, played by distant commanders, resonated powerfully with a world living under the threat of mutually assured destruction. Kubrick, who would later explore these themes more explicitly in Dr. Strangelove, was already interrogating the logic of military hierarchy that made unthinkable consequences possible. The French army in the film was not just the French army, it was a stand-in for any military structure that demanded unquestioning obedience regardless of moral consequences. This hidden layer of meaning was not just intellectual cleverness, it was a form of resistance using historical distance to critique present dangers that could not be addressed directly without triggering political backlash. Number 7, the German location that was an actual former battlefield. The locations for Paths of Glory were not just chosen for their appearance, they were actual World War I battlefields. Kubrick and his production team discovered that the German countryside where they filmed contained remnants of the very conflict they were depicting. During location scouting, they found preserved trenches, bunkers, and even unexploded ordnance from the Great War. What began as a practical decision to film in Germany became something much more profound when Kubrick decided to incorporate these authentic elements into the production. The actors were not just walking through movie sets, they were treading on ground where actual soldiers had fought and died. This connection to history was not just aesthetic, it was spiritual, creating an almost palpable sense of authenticity that permeates every frame. Some cast members reported feeling an eerie presence during filming, as if the ghosts of the real soldiers were watching over their portrayal. The film's power comes in part from this unconscious channeling of historical memory, a reminder that some places carry the weight of what happened there. Number 6, the actor who refused to work with Kubrick again. Paths of Glory created a rift between Kubrick and one of its key actors that never healed. Ralph Meeker, who played the aristocratic Lieutenant Roger, found Kubrick's directing style so demanding that he vowed never to work with him again. Meeker, a respected method actor, clashed repeatedly with Kubrick over character, interpretation, and performance style. The director's insistence on multiple takes and his clinical approach to emotional scenes frustrated Meeker, who preferred to find his character's truth internally rather than through technical precision. Their relationship deteriorated during the filming of the scene where Roger's cowardice leads to innocent soldiers being condemned. Kubrick demanded a level of moral ambiguity that Meeker struggled to deliver, wanting instead to make the character's villainy more explicit. What audiences saw as a complex portrait of moral failure was the result of this creative tension. Meeker's performance, despite his discomfort with the process, remains one of the film's most unsettling elements, a testament to how sometimes conflict between actor and director can produce something extraordinary. Number 5, the budget crisis that nearly ended production. Paths of Glory faced a financial crisis so severe that production was nearly shut down midway through filming. The initial budget of $934,000 proved inadequate for Kubrick's ambitious vision, particularly for the complex battle sequences. What began as minor overruns quickly escalated when weather delays forced the production to extend its stay in Germany. United Artists, already nervous about the film's controversial subject matter, threatened to pull funding unless significant cuts were made. Kubrick and producer James Harris faced an impossible choice: compromise their vision or risk having the film abandoned entirely. Their solution was characteristically ingenious. They rearranged the shooting schedule to film the most expensive sequences first, ensuring that if funding was cut, they would at least have the battle footage. This gamble paid off when additional financing was secured, but not before Kubrick had to make painful concessions in other areas. The film that audiences eventually saw was a product of this financial battle, a testament to how sometimes creative constraints can force better solutions. Number 4, the censored scene that remained hidden for decades. A pivotal scene from Paths of Glory was cut from most releases and remained virtually unseen for over 50 years. In the original version, after the execution of the 3 soldiers, Kubrick included a sequence showing their bodies being unceremoniously dumped into a mass grave. This grim moment was deemed too disturbing by both censors and some theater owners, leading to its removal from most prints. What audiences did not know was that this scene contained crucial thematic content, directly connecting the individual executions to the broader waste of human life in war. The missing footage was not discovered until film restorers working on the director's cut found it in Kubrick's personal archives. When finally reintegrated, the scene added a layer of horror that made the film's message even more devastating. This was not just censorship, it was a deliberate softening of Kubrick's vision that fundamentally altered how audiences experienced the film. The restoration of this scene decades later was not just about completeness, it was about reclaiming the full force of Kubrick's anti-war statement. Number 3, the military advisor who was fired for being too honest. The film's military technical advisor was fired for being too accurate. Colonel James D. Boulware, a decorated veteran hired to ensure military authenticity, initially provided invaluable insights into uniforms, procedures, and dialogue. However, as production continued, Boulware began pointing out historical parallels between the film's events and contemporary military practices that made studio executives uncomfortable. During a meeting about the court-martial sequence, Boulware allegedly stated, "This isn't just World War I history, this is how the system still works, just with better PR." This candor was not just appreciated, it was deemed dangerous. Kubrick, intrigued by Boulware's insights, wanted to incorporate more of this contemporary relevance, while the studio wanted the advisor gone. The compromise was Boulware's dismissal, but not before he had already influenced key aspects of the film's authenticity. What audiences perceived as historical accuracy was actually a glimpse into military practices that remained relevant decades later, a testament to how little had changed in the relationship between those who command and those who serve. Number 2, the secret message. Kubrick hid in the final scene. The final tavern scene in Paths of Glory contains a hidden message that most viewers completely miss. When the German girl begins singing and the soldiers gradually join in, Kubrick deliberately composed the shot to include specific visual elements that form a subtle commentary. The lighting, the positioning of characters, and even the arrangement of glasses on tables create a visual metaphor for unity emerging from division. What appears to be a moment of simple, emotional connection is actually a carefully constructed statement about the possibility of transcending national and military identities. Kubrick confirmed in a rare interview that he wanted to suggest that the shared humanity of ordinary people could overcome the artificial divisions created by those in power. This was not just artistic flourish, it was a philosophical argument embedded in visual language. The scene's power comes from this dual nature. It works on an emotional level for casual viewers while containing deeper meaning for those attuned to Kubrick's visual storytelling. It is a masterclass in how cinema can communicate on multiple levels simultaneously. Number 1, the real reason Kirk Douglas fought to make this film. Kirk Douglas did not just agree to star in Paths of Glory, he personally fought to get it made when other actors and studios refused. What most people do not know is that Douglas's motivation was deeply personal. His father, a Russian Jewish immigrant, had been conscripted into the Imperial Russian Army during World War I and suffered what would now be recognized as PTSD from his experiences. Douglas grew up with the consequences of war's trauma, seeing firsthand how military service could break even the strongest spirits. When Kubrick approached him with the project, Douglas recognized an opportunity to tell a story that honored ordinary soldiers while exposing the corruption of military power. He used his star power and personal finances to ensure the film was completed, even when United Arts hesitated. This was not just another acting job, it was a mission to give voice to his father's experience and countless others like him. The emotional intensity Douglas brings to Colonel Dax is not just great acting, it is the channeling of family history and personal conviction, creating one of cinema's most powerful performances. Bonus fact, the secret connection to the Pentagon Papers. The most shocking connection about Paths of Glory remained hidden for decades. Kubrick's film directly influenced Daniel Ellsberg's decision to leak the Pentagon Papers. In his memoirs, Ellsberg revealed that watching Paths of Glory in 1957 profoundly affected his view of military and government honesty. At the time, Ellsberg was working as a strategic analyst at the RAND Corporation, often consulting for the Pentagon. The film's depiction of military leaders sacrificing soldiers for political gain resonated with what Ellsberg was witnessing in the escalating Vietnam War. What particularly struck him was the scene where Colonel Dax discovers evidence that the attack he ordered was based on false information. This fictional moment paralleled Ellsberg's growing awareness that official reports about Vietnam's progress were deliberately misleading. Years later, when faced with the decision whether to leak the classified Pentagon Papers, Ellsberg cited Paths of Glory as one of the cultural works that helped crystallize his moral position. Kubrick's fictional World War I drama did not just entertain, it indirectly contributed to one of the most significant whistleblowing events in American history, proving that art's influence can extend far beyond the screen in unexpected ways. Paths of Glory was not just a film, it was a weapon against complacency, a mirror reflecting uncomfortable truths, and a testament to cinema's power to challenge authority. From the explosive battles on set to the real-world consequences it triggered, Kubrick's masterpiece continues to resonate more than 6 decades after its creation. What began as a relatively small production about a specific historical event evolved into a universal statement about the human cost of war and the moral courage required to speak truth to power. The controversies, conflicts, and challenges that plagued its production were not obstacles, they were the very forces that forged its enduring power. As we look back at this remarkable film, we are reminded that the most meaningful art often comes from struggle, both on and off screen. If this journey through cinematic history opened your eyes to the hidden stories behind one of film's greatest anti-war statements, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. In a world still plagued by military conflicts and the sacrifice of young lives for political gain, Paths of Glory remains not just relevant, but essential. As Kubrick himself might say, the paths to glory do not just lead to the grave, they lead to truth if we are brave enough to follow them.